suck my stomach now. Welcome to Langley Adam Library tonight. It is my great privilege and honor to have Diane and Asaka here tonight. She is an 8th descendant of Hannah Dunstan, and I'm going to turn it over to her. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Yes, Diane Itasaka, and I was born Diane Dustin. As Sue said, 8th generation direct descendant from Hannah's second-born son, Nathaniel. I will mention what I'm not. I'm not a public speaker. I'm not an official curator. It's
Sorry.
probably
No,
not
it doesn't work,
on.
it's just a camera.
Okay, my voice. I'm not a historian. I'm not a novelist. I learned about Hannah growing up in upstate New York. I was born in Plattsburgh, and I learned from my great aunt Dorothy, whose sister married a Dustin. And she was a librarian, and she was a scholar, and so much of what I know came from well before I came to this area. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you to my friend Robin here. She is I call her our fiery redhead, because Hannah was known to be a fiery redhead. So I want to thank her. She is a huge supporter, and it means a lot to me to have the support. She's helped out at the Garrison House, and she helps tell the story. And I want to thank Jay, who's also done so much to promote the Garrison House and the Dustin family. So at this time, I just want to say thank you for being here. A lot of my story, again, comes from when I was growing up. In talking about the history of the atmosphere at that time, in 1697, 319 years ago, we had the Abenaki natives, and they were a number of nations. They had the Micmacs and the Passamaquoddy and the Pentucket. So they made up one tribe. I was born in Plattsburgh, as I mentioned, and that was Iroquois Nation. Iroquois was the Seneca and the Mohawks and some others, and the Abenakis and the Iroquois were in competition for the French-Canadian resources, where they had a very lucrative business going, taking people from this area, taking them up to Quebec, and they would be paid for either the person, who would be either a slave, or they would take the place of a lost family member, or they would take the scalp. And people ask me, I'm not sure what they were for, but they were the same value, the same 25 pounds that a slave was worth. So if they didn't get the slave, they get the scalp. This was the way they made their living. This was as I said, the environment, the atmosphere that was happening. The Iroquois and the Abenakis were both working for the French, and they all learned from the English a lot of their skills and their abilities in battle. So keeping that in mind, it was like a full circle, and everyone was really out to survive themselves. In 1697, Hannah Dustin and her husband Thomas were living in a log cabin on Eudora Street in Haverhill, which is a quarter of a mile from where the actual Garrison House is right now. If you don't know where it is, I do have maps, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Hannah was in bed with her 6-day-old baby, and it was just before her 39th birthday. And this was her 12th child. She was in bed when the community was under siege. Houses were being burnt down. Houses of refuge were also wooden, and they were being burnt down. They had started building the garrisons, the brick properties, the fortresses, starting in Ipswich and Newbury. And Haverhill was just in the process of building some. The Hannah Dustin garrison on Hilldale Ave had been started. It was in the process of being built, but it didn't have doors and windows, so it wasn't safe yet. So when the natives came through and got to their house, Thomas, Dustin, and the children, and that was their protocol at the time, the dad would take the children and run in one direction. The mom would have to stay with the youngest, or any who couldn't run on their own. And with that in mind, the garrison, a quarter of a mile away, wasn't ready, so they had to go a mile up towards downtown Haverhill, basically, for safety. So at that time, what they did when they were taking people, they would burn the houses down behind them. They would have the person from the house take the valuables or the utilitarian items from the kitchen or barn or whatever and carry them with them so that they could add that to what they had up to their tribe, their tribal area, their camps. So they were, when this particular house was under siege, Hannah was with her nursemaid, Mary Neff, her neighbor who had lost her husband earlier to another attack. So Mary Neff was 51, and Hannah 39, and then the 6-day-old baby. They were taken, and they were heading up 65 miles north to outside of Concord, which is Boston. And that's where the camps, the Abenaki camps, were at the time. So Hannah and Mary and the baby were just about 4 miles away. They were going through Atkinson, not even 4 miles. And Hannah wanted to continue to nurse baby Martha. She started to cry. Now, again, this story is in a number of different books. There are a lot of resources, but also having grown up in upstate New York, not in this area, the account that I have is also from my great aunt who did a lot of research on this. So you'll have to excuse me when I don't say resources say, because we weren't there, and of course I'm just going by what I've heard. And there is a maple tree, not a maple tree, an apple tree that was supposedly on Maple Ave. And that's where they had taken baby Martha and had hit her against the tree, and she died instantly, and they left her there. Years later, in 1840, I just want to mention, Thoreau wrote about the story, and he went, and that apple tree was supposedly still there, and he wrote about it, and he talked about the story. His story was a little gruesome, because it was very detailed, but supposedly the tree was there. It is no longer there. But oftentimes you hear that maybe it was a rock, or, but it doesn't matter. At the time, again, when I was growing up, I heard that Hannah was a very strong woman, very, very strong religiously. She was very strong in family. But what she wanted to do, most likely, is curl up and lie down on the ground and not go any further. If she did that, she would have been considered weak. They would have hit her on the side of the temple and taken her scalp, and that would have been it. She had to continue to go forward with Mary Neff and with the rest of the people. They had taken 26 total that day from Haverhill. 13 they slaughtered. They slaughtered others while she was away, but the other 13 were the ones that she went with. They were going north. They went through Atkinson. They got all the way up to this Boscawen. They went approximately 12 miles a day on foot. And when they did get up there, they were sent to different little islands. She, Mary, and another gentleman who we're going to talk about, they were put on different islands with different families, but all within earshot of each other. And then at that time they were fed. They were not supposedly cared for and fed on the way. But they did get some help. And I am going to ask Robin, because she tells the story of Samuel Leonardson very, very well. But I'm going to have her tell that part of the story.
Samuel had been abducted 18 months earlier by the same tribe, and he was still alive. He's 12 years old. And the Indians that were caring for him, the family of Indians, became rather complacent. And when Hannah and Mary got to the family where he was there also. And they began planning how they were going to survive and get away. And he asked his Indian captor, how do you do what you do? How do you knock them out and kill them? And this Indian, having become so complacent, told the boy exactly how to do it. So that is, and he shared that with Hannah and Mary. The other amazing thing is early in their trek, that 65 miles, Hannah did almost all of it with only one shoe. She had lost one shoe, I think, on the first day. You imagine how strong her desire to live was, not even knowing if her husband and her children were still alive. So Samuel is another hero.
Yes. Yeah, this was in the ice and snow. This was mid-March. And it was unexpected. And when they made the trek up, it didn't get any better. When they made it up there and they were in the camps and they did start to plan, it's because they had heard that the very next day, actually on March 30th, was when she was making the attack. They had heard that the next day they were going to be taken to Quebec City, which is 330 miles away. And that's almost a whole month of walking 12 miles a day. And once they got there or near there, they would have been required to run a gauntlet. And that's done in different ways, but one of the ways they did it was 2 rows or 2 lines of the natives, and they'd have weapon of choice, and they would be able to, you run through, and if you survived all of their weapons, then you would go further. You would become, Canadian. So at that point, they knew that they had to get away. And as Robin was saying, we hear a lot when people come into the garrison. She was the one who killed the Indians, and there is controversy. But when you think about, yes, they killed her child. Yes, she wanted to avenge them, most likely, because a nursing mother doesn't have that kind of a hormone of waking up wanting to kill someone. But I might be biased. But when she had made that decision, I really feel, and I was told growing up, she didn't know if her family had survived. She didn't know if they had gotten to that garrison. And fortunately, when she did come home, they did survive. But Hannah Bradley, who went with her, had lost 27 family members total. You don't hear her story. But while they were up there on the islands, and they had to plan to get away, Hannah's island had 10, her captors, there were 10, and most of them were children. And these children were also taught the way Samuel was to, they were skilled in scalping, but they're also skilled in communication, how they let the others know if there was something going on. If they were under attack, there were certain ways that they could do that. So Hannah, Samuel, and Mary supposedly knew that, and knew that any one person making that sound would keep them from getting away once and for all. So that's where the attacks came in. And they had to get far enough down when they went to the canoe. They knew they had to get far enough away. All but one canoe had been sunk. So they got into that, but Hannah went back, and she went back for the scalps. Those natives were already dead, and she took the scalps with her for 2 reasons: proof and a monetary value to possibly replace what they had lost. So they did get back into the canoe and they came down and they landed back in Haverhill. And I'm sure I'm leaving a lot of it out, but the main thing I want to say is she was to be put on trial because it wasn't acceptable, especially because she was a woman and that was a man's job. It's a cliche, but speaking maybe from the culture, when she went to Boston, they did dismiss the trial idea, and she came back and she was paid for the scalps, and the scalps did help to fund the remainder of the building of the Garrison House. But in the meantime, when she had found that her family had survived, and they did not know if she had survived, they also had to build up their community. Because as her house was being burnt down, there was smoke and fire and other different. She wasn't the only one being taken and homes being destroyed. It was throughout the community. So when they were building the garrison, the fortress, garrison was built of brick, and the stairs inside didn't exist, but they had ladders that they would be able to pull up so that if anyone did come into the home, to the property, they would be able to pull those up out of the way. Usually garrisons, I know when we see garrisons these days, they have an overhang. They used to have, and this one doesn't have that, but this one, or many of them had little brick areas missing underneath the overhang where they would be able to put a gun out. And the windows are small so that you can see out easier than someone can see in. And I'm sure it was a culture where they were on alert at all times. But when you built a garrison for a community, the fathers of the township, would grant you militia. So this particular one had 5 young men who also lived, they had families in the area, but they lived in the fort garrison. So they would take over the attic area, or possibly the basement. Hopefully this time it would be the basement. But the first floor was for any family whose houses were under siege, and they had to rebuild, and they would stay there temporarily until it was time for them to leave. And sometimes they had up to 30 people living in the house at one time. The Dustin family, since they no longer had their home, they would have the second floor, and that's where they would supposedly retire to at the end of the day. But the fireplace that's in the garrison is the largest, supposedly the largest fireplace in the city of Haverhill. And it's not the original, but it's the original design. Because there was a fire in the garrison, I'm just going to show this picture. This is what it looks like today. There was a barn attached to the back. In 1938, there were people living there. No power, no plumbing, and still. And the barn burnt down. So there is no barn there now, but it did damage to the garrison itself. So in the early 1950s, there was work done, and it was brought up to code more, and they thought it would be a good idea to take out the fireplace and put a front door, which they didn't used to have front doors. So when it was redone, they replaced the fireplace the way it had been. So when you go in there, it's not the original fireplace. However, the bricks for most of the property, most of the garrison, were made by Thomas. Because at the end of the street behind the garrison, it's private now, but it goes down to Little River. Many of you know where Little River comes into Lafayette Square. And it's all clay bed. So they built the house close enough to make the bricks where they had the clay. There's also a railroad track back there. but they were able to build this property so that it would be standing for however long, and it's still standing. And that's where we volunteer on weekends to keep it open, to keep it there for the public, because even though it does belong to the Dustins, it also belongs to the community. We want to make sure of that. And we aren't open every weekend, but we are open the first weekend, Saturday and Sunday, June through October. And we open the third Sunday of each month. And, okay. So, you want me to repeat everything?
No,
It's just the
Oh, okay.
I think we're having a hard time hearing you back here. so.
Okay.
The third Sunday of each month.
Talk like you're talking to me.
June through October.
And what's the other
On
one?
the first Saturday.
The first Saturday and Sunday of each month. June through October.
And the hours.
11 to 3.
You can see that from the main hall, she's over there lap, right? They're not really
Yes,
stepped in.
it's right across from the golf course.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes, it is. So when Hannah returned and she was able to tell her story, first of all, the person who interviewed her was Cotton Mather, Reverend Mather, who 5 years earlier had interviewed a number of those who were on trial as witches. That was in 1692, when 19 people had died either while incarcerated or put to death. So Cotton Mather, 5 years later, sat with Hannah and did get her account of the story. What he did was he turned it into a sermon, so he missed a lot of the essence of her, and that's part of what I was growing up learning from my aunt, and she was biased, I'm sure, but it gave me a story that I was able to coincidentally end up in this area to tell. And when she did return to Haverhill after leaving Boston, she thought she felt ashamed because she felt that's how she would be treated. But Haverhill, and Groveland was part of Haverhill at that time too, as was Danvers, Andover, Atkinson, all through. They welcomed her and they thanked her. And she was able to, she had to ask forgiveness to be able to go back to her church. And she had a great deal of support with that. And she had a great deal of support in finishing the garrison and being a part of the community. And when you're not, your family goes down with you, so she had to do it for her kids and her husband as well. So when they finished the garrison and they had people come through, the property was used for years and years. But while she was alive, I mean, you're talking a number of battles that happened, a number of little wars that were going on. And after she passed away, of course, in 1736, at the age of 79, that house was still considered a place of refuge. She lived, and she and her husband, they had their 13th child on her return, and they named her Lydia, which was the name of the oldest woman who was incarcerated as a witch. Lydia Dustin had died in 1692. So Lydia was named for her. And so she lived a long life. Thomas passed away just 4 years before she did. And they say that she had moved back to Ipswich after he died. But her son Jonathan was living in a Dustin homestead where Hannah Dustin Nursing Home is, you know the boulder, does anyone know that boulder and you wonder what that's doing there? That's the site of the last place that she lived. That was her son John's house. I believe he was her third son. So yeah, she lived a long life, and the thought of her sitting there in front of a flax wheel, looking out the window constantly, probably for the rest of her life. But for years and years after, because of what they did, because of building that garrison and coming back and being able to finance it and all, it also housed soldiers during the Revolutionary War in the mid-1770s. And throughout a great deal of time, early 1800s, and a lot of the artifacts in the house are more the late 1700s, early 1800s. But it was built to last, and it's still there. You can touch it. It's real history. And the militia, that was home to them, not just a job, but it was their community. And it was important that they keep it going, which is what I'm still doing. So it's about.
Could you explain the law more at that time, why she had to go on trial?
Well, because all I understand, and I don't understand why actually, but the laws they had in the books were English. The king still had a heavy hand in the area. The king sent soldiers here from England to make sure that they didn't practice religion outwardly. They could have their little churches, but they could not have celebrations of religion. But at the same time, the Abenaki natives had converted to Christianity. So the natives and the Iroquois as well, I understand, in upstate New York. So you have Christians. The king still wanted to control the religion in the area. Religion was law. So whatever laws were on the books were based on that. And I don't know, there are a number of books out there that explain what would happen if she went on trial. And they're very difficult to read because they're written in Old English, and they're recently written. So that part I really don't know, and I have been asked that many times. I'm not a historian, and I'm learning as I go, and this is the third summer that we've been open in a very long time. So I love hearing other people's stories. I love knowing ancestry, and anyone else who I want to do an article one day that says, "Are you my cousin?" Because there are so many who aren't. They're not talking about it. Not sure. Haven't been there, but we want to have those conversations. So at this time, I think the main point is there's controversy. We're not going to rewrite history. Everyone had their own reason for doing what they did. The women, as well as the men, were very strong in that time. The big spinning wheels that we have at the garrison, supposedly it was a 5-mile walk every day to run one of those. She had a loom that she was making, like a piece of muslin. It was pretty intricate, not detailed, but just very finely done. And supposedly, when she was being taken, one of the natives had taken a knife and just cut it right off the loom. And they put the items that she had to collect in the house in that cloth. And when she was up at the camp, she was looking for something to put the scalps in. She coincidentally found her cloth, and she put them in the cloth and brought them back. And that cloth is now framed, and it's at Buttonwoods. And they bring it up for our annual.
Who bought the scalps? Who would, wow.
I know, I do not know what they were used for, but everyone wanted them.
Huh.
It just seemed like it was the French, the Iroquois, and the Abenakis. They had a reason. I'd like to know.
There's a book out, The Massacre on the Merrimack, have you read that? Which reads a lot like a history book. So it's not a novel, but it reads like a history book. But it tells a lot about that item and taking the scalps. And I think part of the thing about the scalps was if they brought them to the French, they would get money for them.
That's true.
And therefore, they took them to the French to get the money.
Right, but what did the French use?
I don't know.
That's the question.
Just for proof.
I know, well, that's why she took them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I hadn't read exactly what they used for.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
So she was. Oh, that's true. Yeah, women didn't vote until sometime after 1960.
Excuse me, was Lydia Dustin a relative of Hannah Dustin's family?
Yeah, of Thomas Dustin, yes, yeah, she was. And Hannah was an Emerson, so our other lineage is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Her brothers became Tories and went to Canada right after she returned. So there's a lot of history there. But also, yes, Hannah is the first woman in the United States to have a statue erected in her honor. That statue is the one on Boscawen Island. And that was, the one in Haverhill is not a replica of it, but it's newer. And I believe that one was given by the French. I believe the one in Haverhill. But the one in Boscawen has another whole story to it. If you haven't been up there, it's ridiculous.
Where is that located?
Boscawen Island?
I'm not in this
Yeah.
area, so it's
Oh,
like.
it's outside of Concord, New Hampshire, Bow, New Hampshire, yeah, it's,
EOS.
B-O-W, B-O-W. Yes. But the statue erected in Hannah's honor was for colonial mothers, and she was the icon.
That place you see the statue is, was that the last place that she went to before she escaped?
That's the island that she was held
Okay.
on,
What's
yes.
the name of the island again?
Boscawen, B-O-S-C-O-W-A-N.
And that's in New Hampshire, you said?
Yes, outside of Concord, New Hampshire. And it's where the Merrimack River connects to the Kentucky, yeah. And when you're standing on that island, you can see both. You can see both.
Which would you say is the best book to read up on this?
I grew up reading A Gallant Warrior by Helen Mann. A Gallant Warrior was published in 1955. I was a year old, and that's why I grew up. My mother had me read that book.
That was written by who?
It was written by Helen Mann, M-A-N-N. She's from this area. She's passed away, but she's from this area. Her family's still in the area. And she was one of the trustees on our family association. Massacre on the Merrimack is a great book to read because he did 5 years worth of, he's got 80 pages of
Notes.
footnotes.
Yes.
So take your pick. Yes, yes.
Atkinson wrote, yeah.
Yeah, Jay Atkinson. Robin her book club just read.
We did too.
Yeah,
But we met at the Garrison House for
Oh,
our
nice.
book club night. She hosted us, and that's something she didn't tell you, but if you wanted to take a group there, There's a phone number you can call, and you can take a group of people there. We had hors d'oeuvres, and we had our book club night. There were 19 of us.
Wine.
Yeah, wine.
And I wouldn't leave.
It was getting dark, and we weren't leaving, no. But it was a wonderful place to have
Great idea.
the book
Yeah.
club meeting, because she told the story, we got a tour. It was fascinating, truly fascinating. What an incredible woman, truly an incredible, courageous woman.
I was just gonna add that I wasn't there for the book club. I just went on my own, and I really enjoyed it, being new to the area myself, and I think it's a really neat house. The history, just the structure itself, to be able to see it for yourself, regardless of the story behind it, it's part of our, there's how many left of those houses, and to be able to walk in there and it's still standing, and
3. There's
Yeah.
3 of them.
There were 5
Garrison
5
houses.
brick garrison houses in Haverhill. 2 are gone, 3 are still in existence. One of them was made into a 5-family, and the other one is the Hazen House, which is when you're on the road going along the river on Water Street, and you come to the light, you can go take a left up Groveland Street,
Mhm.
and there's a brick house
Yeah.
with leaded windows.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's one of the other garrisons.
Ah.
That
I
was-
read the book by Judy Atkinson, Masculine. You could not believe the building that he invested in. Yeah, with that old track. This day and age, we would have froze to death.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's why I wondered how.
Such courage.
How come they didn't get frostbitten or,
She didn't lose any toe. She was barefoot. One foot was bare,
yeah.
and she had just had a baby. And
Oh.
having a baby then was so much more. Took so much longer to heal
Right.
than it does today.
Yeah.
And amazing, truly an amazing story.
Is there a spot where that Jonathan, Dusty lived, where she lived out her last year, that person could go look at it?
Yes, across from Haverhill High School, to the right of the Hannah Dustin Nursing Home. You can pull in there, and there's a boulder, and Whittier Votek had put a couple of benches.
Yeah.
Right.
So her house on Eudora Street, the first house, is anything left there at all?
No, we can't even find the foundation.
Is there a mark, it's not a marker or anything?
No, there isn't. And one gentleman, and this is what happens when I open up, when people come in and they have stories.
Mhm.
There's a gentleman who lives across the street, right near the golf course, and he said he's got the foundation in his backyard.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, that's
And,
nice.
I'm open.
Mhm.
So if anyone had, some proof. 'cause we-
She went to see, when she came back to the area, she went to see the Reverend John Ward also. And isn't there a John Ward house around here?
That's next to the Buttonwoods Historical.
That's where it is?
Yes,
Okay. I
yep.
knew it was around here somewhere.
Yeah, it's on John Ward
Avenue?
Avenue, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, yeah, go right ahead.
Oh,
Yes.
you can imagine, I can't even imagine, being her, living out the rest of her life, probably wondering if she did all the right things. And in the early 1900s, a local church in Haverhill, going through archives, found a letter that she had written saying, "I don't even know if I'm worthy." So it did prey on her heart all her life. And it's very interesting, the history of her after her not going to trial, but her coming back to the area. There's not a lot known about her until the early 1900s, when the church, going through their archives, found this letter from her, and it was a real telling letter about her heart. And she was essentially saying, I hope I can be forgiven. And I thought that was just very beautiful.
Where is that letter now?
I think it's still at that church. It's
What church
referenced.
is that?
What church is it?
I'm not sure which church it is, because it's changed names.
Yeah, it's in the book, The Massacre on the Merrimack. I highly recommend you read it. It's a little heavy,
Very good.
but what an incredible story of, I think, a very remarkable woman. I don't know if women today have that kind of fortitude. Now, I'm representing her today, and I wish I was 39.
You look it.
I'm a senior citizen.
Good question.
Yeah.
Didn't she kill the Indians in order for her to get away?
Yes.
So
Yes, she
that they
did.
wouldn't follow her, so what
Right.
remorse should she have?
Yeah, it's called self-defense.
Because she went back afterwards. She got
To
out
get
of the
the
canoe
scalps.
and went back to get the
Right.
scalps, and I think that's what that
Yes.
bothered her.
Yes.
That was
Yeah,
the
but she
third-
went back just to get the money so that she'd have that
Right.
financing when
Yeah.
she got back.
And proof.
And proof.
And
And
Proof
proof.
first.
And
Yeah.
Proof of her story.
Yeah.
Just to think of her going into the canoe and going into the water, and this is in March in freezing weather, and her clothes being freezing wet
Yeah.
all the way down.
And you think about our creature comforts and how
Yeah.
we're hot in here right now, and we've got air conditioning. And, you know, they had to scuttle all the other canoes so that the Indians wouldn't come after them.
Oh, right.
And still wonder all the way down.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think that if she had not taken the scalps, being a woman at that time, nobody would have believed it.
No,
Right.
that's
So she
right.
needed proof.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
That's right. She wouldn't have a statue, although she didn't want a statue, I'm sure. She would never have wanted, she wouldn't have wanted to be recognized for what she did.
Yeah.
But it's important because it's a reminder as history that we have it. Hannah Bradley, if she had taken scalps, she was taken twice, and almost a third time.
Yeah.
If she had taken scalps, it would be her statue. She had lost all of her.
How many people got away that day with her?
Just the
Just
three of them
the three of
left.
them?
So, but I know that Hannah Bradley ended up going up to Canada,
Yeah.
and her husband went
By her, yeah.
and
So is there a story of Hannah Bradley or something?
there, well, there is.
It's in that book.
It's in the book, but she's not a main character.
No.
No.
Oh, she's not.
But she's in other books, and there is some writing. Actually, there was a Revolutionary War reenactor who came a couple of years ago to the garrison. He brought Hannah Bradley's story to me. It's definitely worth looking
You keep saying what a strong woman she was. What did they do about eating, and what did they eat, and
at.
how did they do it?
According to Jay Atkinson's book, Samuel had helped them he befriended the two white ladies. And he helped them find food that was like root food,
Pine
that
nuts.
was pine nuts, things that were in the ground, and how to eat them and how to prepare them. So he helped sustain them on the way.
Is there a lot of controversy still about her statue with the hatchet in her hand?
The statue's not in her hand anymore, the one in Haverhill.
Yeah.
Is
Isn't it
still?
there?
Oh, the scalps are not in her hand.
No.
Yes, okay, yes. There is a group, I'm not gonna say that they're connected to the mayor, but they wanna remove the statue. So one day you might be thank you, asking to sign the petition. Yes.
No.
Why do they want to do that?
Because there is a group who actually in the 1980s banned a gallant warrior from schools and the Haverhill Library. Yeah, so.
Who wrote a gallant warrior again?
Man, M-A-N-N. Yeah.
So if it was a man, the book wouldn't have been banned? Of course not.
If a man had done the scalping, if a man had done, It would have been defending his territory.
Yeah, but it's more heroic for her to do it.
Well, we get that.
Thank you. Yeah, I know.
The museum that has the her
Scalp
piece of cloth that
Yeah,
yeah.
scalp cloth.
Does it also have that weapon that she came back with?
Yes, I have a picture of it.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
She
But it's at that. It's at
with
Want me to grab it?
a musket and an axe, which she brought to Boston. And Sewell was the one she went to see first.
Right.
I forget his first name.
Who's Sewell?
He's
The judge.
he was a pastor
Yes.
or something in Boston, and I think Mathis was a judge. Sewell sent her to Mathis, and Sewell was wearing a hussier's shirt under his clothes because he was one of the judges of the witchcraft.
Yes.
And he was very upset about himself doing that. So he had a hussier outfit underneath his clothes.
Yeah, he.
Penance. No, he was doing penance.
Right,
Penance,
right,
yeah.
right. Yes, during the witch trials, he and Judge Saltonstall both refused to preside over them. And later on, Haverhill was anti-slavery. And there was a lot of controversy about that. And in the basement of the garrison, and we're not really supposed to go down in the basement right now for insurance purposes. The handrail isn't there, but there is a brick archway. There used to be a tunnel under the backyard, under the old barn. And it was filled in when the barn burned. And that was supposedly used later on as the underground railroad. And there are a number of other houses along there on that side of Hilldale that go down to Little River that have those arches. But before that, the archway was there. There was supposedly an area in the house, in the upstairs, that was a little hideaway that we got go down into. So it was also, I think it's small enough for children to go out and away if the house was under attack. This is a picture that we have of the tomahawk head. And this is a picture of the rock. I don't know with the glare if you can see that, but yeah, it does. It has little baby Martha's markings on it.
Where's that
stone.
rock?
It's the one across from Haverhill High School, next to Hannah Dustin.
Okay, is that Hilldale Avenue
No,
also?
that's Monument Street. Yes, Monument comes out onto Hilldale, and then you take a left and go up to the Wilson.
Looks like that picture was taken before the house was there.
Yeah, I know. I know, it's so true. I think when the house came down, well, there are apple trees in the back, so I think it was all farmland at one time.
Yeah.
Because just up the street on the corner of North Broadway and Monument, there's a square colonial. That is a Dustin homestead, an old Dustin homestead. I don't know the history of it, but that was probably the owner of this land at one time. But there was another house, because they used to put more than one family home in each homestead area. So
Are there plaques on these houses to identify them?
there might be on the one on the corner, I'm not sure. We have one on the Garrison House. Yeah. So we can pass that one.
Does this rock have any other significance besides just being?
Supposedly it's just marking the site.
It looks huge.
It's pretty big.
My mind continues to think about the young boy,
Oh,
Samuel,
Yes.
Yeah.
and what happened with him. I mean, he had 18 months with the Indians. He saved those women's lives, and they were strong enough to do what they needed to do. But what an incredible 12-year-old boy. Can you imagine a 12-year-old boy today?
Yeah. And especially with a master that was over him, an Indian master.
Yes.
Yeah, in that letter that you were talking about,
Yes.
I think she said that she was the most comfortable she'd ever been for that short amount of time. For two reasons. When she was finally up there in their camp, they did treat her well because she was a value, but also for her belief that she, for some reason, deserved to have been taken and returned, because it made her appreciate and it made her more, higher in the eyes of God. I don't remember.
So what happens
The young boy?
He went back to Worcester and they,
Oh, that's where he was from.
yeah, he went
Yes.
back to Worcester and they apparently didn't think that he had survived. He'd been gone so long. And I don't believe Hannah had seen him again. Is, that is mentioned.
Basically, one of the reasons why they wanted to get rid of that statue of Hannah is that this feel good towards Indians. You know, like the Redskins in
Well,
Washington, they're supposed to change their name.
With regards to getting rid of the statue, it didn't come from a Native American. In fact, Sly Fox and Hobie Sanford are very much supporters of Hannah Duston, and they're Micmac and Wampanoag. They're related. You might know that. It's not coming from that source. Now, the one in Boscawen, the Abenaki natives, had recently petitioned the state of New Hampshire, who owns the island and the statue, that they wanted to have their own statue placed beside hers. And basically, the state of New Hampshire turned them down. They said, if you find a better place, we'll consider it. And that was last year.
You're talking about the statue in GAR Park?
No, the one up in New Hampshire. The one in GAR Park is the one that people want to have removed.
That's what I'm saying, that's.
Yes, that's the one they want to have removed. Yes. Yes, that's.
So we're counting on all of you to stand up and say, no, leave it there. Yes.
Why is it put there in that particular place? Is that something to do with her? Where it is in the park here?
I don't think so. I think because it was visible
Okay.
in town hall
Oh,
and,
that- That park was a lot larger. They redid 125 and the
Right.
side streets beside it, so that
it was set
it looks
back
nothing
in.
like it did 50 years ago.
Yeah, that's why.
Oh, and at the time it was put there,
Oh,
she was an icon. She was very well thought of, and she was a hero. And,
In 1800s.
right.
So on the picture of that rock, there's a plaque that says New Hampshire.
Cantaloupe, New Hampshire?
That's where she was.
Right.
I thought you said that boulder was across the high school.
It is.
it
It's
is.
here in
The thing on the plaque, those are the people that gave the picture. So I think that's what that means.
Okay.
That's the way I interpret it.
I thought it was quite amazing too that Mary Neff, the midwife, refused to leave her side. She put her life at risk also to make sure that she was there for Hannah and the baby. She could have left with Hannah's husband Thomas and chose not to. And she was 51 years old, and in that day and age, a lot of women didn't live to be that age.
Yeah, right. The people were sick too, she was running the temperature.
Yes, she was.
There-
Way before antibiotics.
So no one's ever made a film or done any documentary on this?
Actually,
Oh, okay.
there's a film that was done and quite a few interviews, and I played Mary Neff actually.
Really?
Yes, and we filmed it down on Plugs Pond, using that as the river. with the canoe. It's in the hands of HC Media
And that's
for 8, 9, 10 years.
wow.
Yeah, that's why we have Jay do what he does, because yes, we can also but
It's
it's volunteer.
It's a massacre on
and
the Merrimack
Yeah.
has interviews from
by
really famous people, authors, and Cedric Dustin,
Jay.
who is our 90-year-old association. He was the former president of the Garrison Association. I took over for him. He's still on the family association, Dustin. And I should probably mention, because people do ask why the different spellings, but for years and years and years, you hear that it didn't matter how something was spelled. It wasn't as much identification as registering. When they got off the ship coming from England, their names were written phonetically, depending on whoever was writing it, and that just continued. I'm a DUSTIN. The association name begins with Dustin ON and then dash Dustin IN. That's how it is legally. And there are a lot of DUSTONs in the Hampstead area, but most DUSTINs. But they're all the same.
You know, the author of that book, Massacre on the Merrimack, was Jay Atkinson, and I wanted to look at the back of the book to see if there was any, could tell me anything. But Thomas and Hannah bought their land, 12 acres, from an Atkinson. And was it his ancestors or not?
All I can think, he has not mentioned that
No, I
at
didn't.
all.
Yeah, I didn't see
But
it,
he's supposedly not related to Atkinson, New Hampshire, and it might have been
No,
because
Atkinson,
Atkinson
New
was
Hampshire.
part
Yeah,
of Haverhill at the time, so.
yeah, because they are, it abuts
Yes,
Haverhill, yeah.
yes. And when he spoke at the Atkinson Library for book signing, he didn't mention anything, Jay Atkinson
No.
of Atkinson, he
Oh,
didn't mention, so.
okay.
I don't
Just a
know.
coincidence, probably.
I would think that he would,
Yeah.
yes. And he's not related to Hannah Dustin, but he has, usually at the end of talking to the family at our annual meetings, he will say how much he envies us for being a part of it, although he said he tried to keep unbiased in his work. He does. So he used to play around the Garrison when he was growing up in Rose Nest.
Now, if you ever go to visit the Garrison House and you're blessed enough that Cedric is there, also known as Dusty, he's fiery and he has so much history to tell. Diane says she learns something new from him every time he comes. So he's an amazing man too.
So he's continually doing research.
He is. He doesn't write it down, so we have to listen. And we asked him to be our guest speaker this August for that reason, because we never know when he's not going to be talking about it anymore. So we want to get to.
So do you have a date for him to be our guest speaker?
It's our second Saturday of August.
Second Saturday.
Yes.
Where is that going to be held?
That's at Buttonwoods. It's the family association meeting we have every year.
Is it Buttonwoods in Haverhill?
Yes. Yes.
Is that over by the river?
Yeah.
Is that open to the public?
Buttonwoods is.
No,
The meeting? In the past, it was mostly family, but we've invited others. Yeah, we've invited others. I want more people there. We have people come from all over the country because they're doing a lineage, they're stopping, looking at archives and, libraries, town halls, whatever, and they're coming from California, even Canada, Arkansas, Missouri.
Michigan, that day I was there,
Michigan.
had a whole family there.
Yes, there was.
That was neat.
Yes. Japan.
Well, and the last time I was there, there were 3 or 4 different families, one of which, they're all related.
Yes.
One young girl, must have been in her early 20s, growing up with stories probably the same way you did, and one beautiful elderly senior citizen lady with photographs. Photographs, which I took pictures of and sent to you. It was amazing, and how much she looked like the descendants that she came down the line. It was really incredible. Wasn't she perky?
Yeah, she was. She was. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not a solemn place. It really is. It has good energy. It does.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
It's great.
She's brought lots of